Welcome everyone, thanks so much for coming. Well, 2017 really ended with a bang with all the updates on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and we're all excited because we figure it's going to be a massive year this year. A lot of people that have not been interested in the crypto world and the blockchain world are now interested, and hopefully some of our panels and talks will help educate them and me. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and we've got Verity Coleman from Coinbase in a moment. But firstly, I wanted to introduce Colleen McDonald. She's been a fantastic attorney here in Shepherd Mullen and has sponsored the drinks for tonight, and she'd like to say a few words.
Thank you. Thanks, I just wanted to welcome everyone here this evening on behalf of Shepherd Mullen. We value our relationship with the FinTech group, and I'm a partner here in the San Francisco office. I work in the finance space, and my practice crosses over a lot of the FinTech area when it comes to setting up your products early on and making sure that, because I do capital markets, that you're ready to do capital markets when it comes to that time, which hopefully I think everybody wants to get to. So again, welcome. I'm so glad to see that we have a full house tonight. That's great. I think you're really going to enjoy the topic. I've already had the pleasure of meeting Jean, so I will turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And now, the moment that everyone's been waiting for, I've been waiting for it for a month.
Sorry.
Because Crypto Shane just disappeared there on his vacation. So tonight we've got our regular 5-minute broadcast on crypto news from Crypto Shane.
Hi, welcome everybody. This is the FinTech Silicon Valley. Thank you. Thank you for coming. This is the FinTech Silicon Valley Crypto News, first one of 2018. We're live here at Shepherd Mullen's wonderful office in San Francisco. Another thank you to Shepherd Mullen for supporting FinTech Silicon Valley and for providing these spaces for us. We couldn't do it without you. So this week's topics, we have 2 bugs, 2 new cryptocurrencies, and ETH at 12. So the first bug is that earlier this week it was announced by the Electrum developers that the Electrum Bitcoin wallet would release a pair of emergency patches to address a very serious security bug. And the way the security bug works is that if you have an Electrum wallet that is not password protected, a malicious website could actually transact using your keys. And if you had a wallet with a password, a malicious website could view your transactions. So the Electrum developers strongly encourage everyone to update to software version 3.05, and if you previously updated this week to 3.04, go all the way to 3.05 to hopefully fix these problems. The second bug is not a software bug, but a capacity bug. 3 major cryptocurrency exchanges, Binance, Bitfinex, and Bitrex, all temporarily halted new account activity, I think last week. This is not due to any regulatory issues. It's purely the fact that so many people have been signing up for these accounts that the services felt that they couldn't handle the influx of new users while also taking care of their existing users. Bitfinex has announced that they plan on reopening January 15th. The other 2 have said haven't released a date on when they're going to open, but they have said that they want to get back up and running and allowing new account signups by the end of January. And then in terms of new cryptos, this week, I think it was 4 days ago, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro announced the creation of 100 million petros, which is a new cryptocurrency backed by the country's state oil reserves. The total value of this currency is supposed to be roughly $5.9 billion US, and that's based on an underlying valuation where each petro coin is backed by 1 barrel of oil that's currently priced at around $59. Now, don't get too excited, because at noon Pacific time today, the Venezuelan Congress declared the creation of the currency illegal. And so if anyone offers to sell you petros, I'd wait a couple days until the legal status of the petro gets settled. The other new token announcement was that Tether the occasionally controversial creator of the dollar-pegged USDT token, they announced the creation of the Euro Tether, which, just like it sounds, it's a new token that's pegged to the euro. Now, unlike the existing Tether token, this is going to be an ERC20 compatible token that's riding on top of the Ethereum blockchain. Tether also announced that they're releasing a brand new dollar-pegged USDT token that will also be an ERC20 compatible token on the Ethereum blockchain. For people who have been using Tether for a while, that's actually it's an Omni-based protocol. That's the underlying technology for that is Bitcoin. So Tether is hoping that this will let them have more capacity and lower transaction fees. So those are both out there. There's no immediate plans that Tether announced to retire the existing USDT token. They're going to both of them run, and I think just see how that plays out. Finally, it seems like I can't get through a single one of these without talking about the price of some token. So today we're going to talk about Ether, which for most of December was roughly in the $700 range, which is kind of relatively steady there. But starting on the first of the year, there's been a big price run up on Ether. As of the time that I wrote this down, which was about 3 hours ago, Ether was trading as high as $12.50 on US-based, US dollar denominated exchanges. If anyone has their phone out there and the Coinbase app installed, maybe you can give me a price update. 1300. 1300. There we go. Thank you. So this is another great sign for the space, hopefully, and hopefully this will be a sign of good things to come in 2018 in the crypto space. So that's the news for this week. As always, you can find more cryptocurrency news and general fintech news at fintechsv.com and on the FinTech Silicon Valley Facebook page. Thank you.
Frank, we missed you.
We missed you too.
And so now it's my pleasure to introduce Verity Coltman from Coinbase, and she's going to do a presentation on Cryptocurrency 101, which we all need. Thanks, Verity.
Thank you. All right, I'm also an Aussie, as you may be able to hear, so I feel like I need to say the token g'day. So starting it off, I just wanted to get a quick show of hands. Who has some crypto holdings at the moment or has participated in some kind of ICO? Okay, that's a pretty good show of hands. Okay, well that's good. I mean, let me give you a quick rundown of what I'm going to cover today. I'll introduce myself, and we can get into this. Basically, very entry-level kind of discussion. I would encourage you, no question is a dumb question. Please feel free to jump in if there's something really burning that you have to ask. Otherwise, I would expect this to maybe take 15 minutes and then we can jump into whatever the audience would like to cover. So yeah, I am an Aussie. I've been working at Coinbase for a few months now, so I'm a new import. I essentially have a financial services consulting background, so I've worked with some really big name clients across the US and Australia. That includes companies like Bank of America, Allianz, a lot of the big 4 Australian banks, and now Coinbase. So I decided to make the jump from consulting because I really enjoyed how interconnected the financial services system is, and I wanted to use my knowledge, but I was a little bit done with traditional banking. I'd already thrown some cash over to Bitcoin and Ethereum. I participated in an ICO. I was like, this technology is really promising. I'm super interested. Where can I sign up to work here? So that's basically how I came to be at Coinbase. It's a really exciting company, and hopefully you'll find part of this discussion interesting. I will also just flag that this is not I'm not formally representing Coinbase, so any views that I discuss here are absolutely my own. With the number of employees in Coinbase, there are lots of people that have differing views, so I wouldn't take this as a formal endorsement in any way. Cool. All right, so let's get started. So I think the key thing that you'll see up on the screen, which is often where discussions around cryptocurrency starts for people who are new to the field, is what is money? Because often what I hear from people is, wait a minute, how on earth can we attribute value to something that is just lines of code? And this gets us back to this core question. So essentially we've seen examples of, non-traditional money being a store of value. the bartering system to start with. And in times of scarcity with money, people often resort to trading other goods and tokens instead, actual physical tokens I'm talking about, not necessarily digital ones. So essentially, there's a lot of reasons that people debate what actually gives cryptocurrency its value. In the case of Bitcoin, it might be that it's scarce. So for those of you who may or may not be aware, there's actually only ever going to be a total of 21 million Bitcoins minted and produced, which makes it innately scarce. So some people say because there's not that many, that's why it's become so much more of a focus for people, and that's why it's essentially become a store of value. So if you bought Bitcoin in the past year, you're probably very unlikely to let it go because you've seen this huge uptick in the value over time. Some other things that arguably give cryptocurrency its value is that it has this underlying security framework, which we've never really seen in traditional money to date. So Bitcoin, for example, as the underlying, so Bitcoin is the currency that sits on top of this underlying technology known as the blockchain, and the blockchain hasn't been hacked. So it has this amazing value proposition that if we can create a system that has a store of value and can't be hacked, then it's arguably going to be something that you can encode transactions in forever and they can't be changed in any way or tampered with. So there's a really strong value proposition for a lot of cases, especially to do with money in that case. And then another one that I would probably want to point to would be, to be able to actually build the blockchain technology, and I'll go into this in a bit more detail in some later slides. There actually needs to be incentive for people to build those blocks, and that is an activity known as mining. Mining actually means that actors within the network are incentivized to dedicate computing power to creating a block, and that is what basically sets that transaction in stone, and they receive Bitcoin or some other coins as a result. It depends what cryptocurrency you're talking about. If some of this is sounding like it's a little bit above your head, by all means, I'll explain a little bit more. But I think the key takeaway from this is money is essentially something that we agree has value, and traditionally it has been held by the Fed and the government being able to distribute money and have control over it through monetary policies. And this is essentially a network which is, global money, which is not controlled by any central authority and shows a lot of promise in terms of the underlying technology. Okay, so let's go back to basics. What is the blockchain? You might have heard, crazy cases. I think, what was it? Long Island iced tea, or like a tea company saying they incorporated with blockchain and their shares went up massively. I mean, that just shows you how overhyped it is at the moment. They're a tea company. I don't think they have anything to do with blockchain, although, I'm not the authority on this space, so maybe they've got some proprietary thing going. So this is actually a visual representation of how I will explain blockchain. I think this is kind of a humorous way, which is maybe not helpful, but it's literally a chain of blocks. So think of interconnected links, and each block is a new link being added. And once it's added, it can't be tampered with, or it hasn't been tampered with to date. A really useful analogy that I like, which Naval Ravikant has used in a podcast I would highly recommend. It's The Quiet Master of Cryptocurrency. It's Naval Ravikant with Nick Szabo and Tim Ferriss. Think of the analogy as a fly in amber. So every layer of amber that gets added to that fly helps to essentially entomb or preserve it further and adds more layers on top of that existing ornament, or whatever you want to call it. And that's essentially what each new block does. So if we have a look at the right-hand side, block 0 is essentially when, say, Bitcoin was first created. It started with one single block, and that's almost like the genesis block. And it holds key information like the timestamp of when it was created and who bought or sold Bitcoin at that point in time. And it has a unique hash number. And basically, it also, from there on in, as you move through time, references every single hash after that point. That's what essentially adds this kind of immutable aspect to cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. That's what makes it arguably unable to be hacked so far. If that's a little bit not quite right, I think the flying amber analogy works pretty well. So let's go into this a little bit more. Why is it important for things to be linked together and not be able to be hacked? Well, essentially, what we've seen in a lot of networks today is that things like ledgers are centralized. So you think about a company ledger, only that company has access to see where money is being sent or where it's being received. That's a classic example. In future with blockchain, or what happens today is that ledger or that piece of paper where you record transactions is essentially not in one place or one database or one Excel spreadsheet anymore, but it's literally on every computer that is connected to that network. So if, say for example, in this illustration, I think essentially what it's trying to show is that, cryptocurrencies rely on this distributed ledger as a way to ensure that there can't be any hacking, because it means that someone needs to have a majority control of the network and all of the miners to be able to complete that. So that means if this little guy down here goes offline, it's fine. It's not actually going to affect the truthfulness of the information that's held within the whole network, because that same information is stored in tens or hundreds of other places. Essentially what happens in this scenario is if I buy $10 worth of Bitcoin, it takes about 10 minutes for that process to be confirmed, and then it is recorded forever that Verity bought $10 of Bitcoin today, and then in future, if I decide to send it to Pemo, I can literally do that, and it's forever recorded in a distributed ledger across wherever those networks are, all over the world, basically. The interesting thing about this as well is that it's more of a peer-to-peer network, so we're not reliant on the central banks, any kind of clearing houses for this to actually take effect. It literally is its own kind of self-governing network, and that is what is really interesting, and that's why it has a lot of traditional people in the finance world, like Jamie Dimon, freaking out, because they may, if it's able to scale, it may mean that in future there is less of a need for those central clearing authorities, and it also makes some governments nervous. And that's why, in many cases we've seen some governments go as far as banning exchanges in crypto because they are not able to control it. Alrighty, let's have a look at some buzzwords. So, uncorrupted digital ledger, kind of started to touch on that with that web view before about how there's literally copies of the ledger for the blockchain for Bitcoin, for example, all over the world, connected by different computers. As long as you have the computing power to run it, you're welcome to run it. If you're really sophisticated, you might even be mining Bitcoin and solving mathematical puzzles to be able to be rewarded in it. This is the incentive to get the network running. And that's a really important point as well, because, in the past when you set up networks, how do you get people to participate? And because Bitcoin has got so much more value behind it now, it means there's a lot of bigger corporations that are dedicating data centers towards mining. Let's have a look at a couple of these other things. Peer-to-peer, I think that's related to this point. If I was a sophisticated computer user, I could easily do this myself. I can send money to and from my friends without any kind of intermediary needing to okay that or verify it. You can also look up any blockchain transaction that takes place, particularly for the bigger cryptocurrencies. It's all public, so you can see every single transaction that's taking place, who verified that it took place, and that's what actually brings us on to this other point about it being trustless trust. So the interesting thing about trustless trust is that now I don't need to know who you are necessarily to be able to send you money. All I need to know is your public address. And that means that, we're able to send information and send things like money all over the place, even if I don't trust you or I don't know who you are. At the moment, how this looks in the current world is I have a PayPal account, maybe I also have an eBay account with a rating, with a seller rating. Hopefully my seller rating is 5 out of 5 stars, so you know that if you buy something from me, I will sell it to you. In the future, you don't need that. You just literally need to see that you've received money from me, as I said, it will happen. And what does this mean in terms of an open system? So this is where the real promise, and this is what I personally am very excited about when it comes to blockchain technology, is that it can actually hopefully provide access to people, banking access or access to money for people in underbanked or unbanked populations. So what we find, in many parts of the world is that banks simply won't service certain areas where there is no, reasonable margin to do so, because this is an open system that is not based on trust and we don't need any kind of intermediary to make it happen. It means that there's a lot more promise for cryptocurrencies to actually enter emerging markets and be able to provide a means for people to have property rights, to have access to currency, and to be able to even use that blockchain as a way to secure additional work. That's part of our big vision that Coinbase is trying to make happen, but this isn't a sales pitch. I'll mention it very briefly at the end. I think I've touched on most of the key things there. And essentially, this comes back to the point that there is no middleman. So this is why it's really exciting. I've spent a lot of many years working in banking environments where banks are the middleman, have been the middleman for basically as long as we've known, since the industrial economy started becoming a thing, and before that it was bartering, so whatever. Without a middleman, we're actually able to get into these markets where we haven't before. And for people like you and I, it means that I have a bit more control over what I want to do with my cryptocurrency, and I'm able to advise and hopefully see some really interesting use cases coming out. At the moment, we've seen some pretty interesting stuff, like sure, I can send a payment internationally, but I don't know if many of you have heard about Kitties. It's basically like digital beanie babies, almost. Some people will hate me for saying that. But I think what's really interesting about this is that people are able to participate in a game and breed these digital cats with unique assets or unique attributes associated with them. And it's a really fun way to kind of have skin in the game and see a realization of how this might transform the way we understand payments and messaging and buying and selling today.
Cats.
Yeah, and cats. Okay, so let me give you a quick rundown of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is essentially the first cryptocurrency. It was started by someone referring to themselves as Satoshi Nakamoto. It started in 2009. Some people have many theories. There are many theories out there about who this person is, whether they're still around. There's plenty of stuff about that online. Some people say that Bitcoin started as a response to the financial crisis, recognizing that banks had far too much power and that put people at risk and risk pulling societies down as a result. Go for your life and have a read. That's a really quick run through from me. Essentially, it's money for the internet. And what we've seen since Bitcoin started is that it's had many peaks and troughs. It's really popular for some people, and for others, they don't want to go near it. We're still seeing a lot of those Wall Street traditional players a little bit hesitant to adopt the technology. We had the launch of futures contracts in mid-December. That's brought some new players into the field, but largely they're still yet to dip their toes in the water on a large scale. It's actually the first decentralized currency. So the white paper is a highly recommended read amongst a lot of my friends. You don't have to be overly technical to understand it, but it is considered like the gold standard of basically most cryptocurrencies. And anything else that you hear of is going to be referred to as altcoins or alternative coins. So what we see today is that Bitcoin still has the largest blockchain, and it's essentially treated as a digital gold, which touches on that item that I mentioned earlier, that people tend to hold Bitcoin. They don't want to let it go because one day it's worth 100, 500, 5,000, 15,000, you know, so people are actually using it more as a store of value, which is why it's likened to digital gold. So why is this technology good? Why should we care? I mean, first of all, like, it's very interesting. Bitcoin is just the first step. Arguably, the industry is still very immature. The market cap is nowhere near some of our more secure traditional securities and assets market sizes that we've seen. There's way less risk of having your financial information compromised, and that's because most users all users once they set up, or once they're able to trade on the blockchain, have a private key which only I should know and no one else will know. And if you wanted to send me Bitcoin, I would give you my public key. So unless you accidentally mix those up, there's way more security. There's no card to be lost or skimmed. And so that means, you know, you're able to transact in a much more secure way. We're hoping that it's actually going to be a way for the existing payments to be more efficient. For those of you who are up to speed on the latest, you know, the Bitcoin blockchain can take 10 minutes to verify. Arguably, that's far too long. Compare that to the Visa network, which does millions of transactions every second. But arguably, it's going to be a way to get cheaper, faster global payments. This is especially important because payments are really expensive. I don't know if you've ever tried to send money overseas as a retail customer, but they're also expensive even if you're an institutional customer. And I think it's pretty ripe for disruption. And touching on a point that I've kind of covered is, you know, we really hope it's going to be more empowering. So it's a way for people to get access to money who haven't had access in the past, or maybe they're in a country where there's extreme inflation or deflation like we see in some countries around the world. So they don't want to hold their money in the local currency because it's literally worth almost nothing. Okay, so this is a PDF, so the GIFs aren't working. But we'll just go through this really quickly and then we'll get on to some questions. So hot tips on what you can do with this information. Learn it. Cryptocurrency is moving so fast. There's a lot of really great people and podcasts that you can follow. It's really one of those areas where if you want to be up to speed, you've got to read, listen, watch, like just learn constantly. I had one of those days at work today where I was like, oh my God, I know nothing. And like that's the amazing thing, because things are moving so quickly that literally you have to get up to speed on stuff that was written about 2 days ago, and suddenly you're speaking to a partner about that. Own it. I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, I really only pay attention to something if there's some skin in the game. So, you know, maybe my first crypto purchase was only like $10 worth of Bitcoin. You can buy down to a really small fraction. I found that I was way more likely to pay attention once my money was there. It's up to you whether that's something that appeals or not. And then use it. So treat yourself. You know, maybe you're not going to use it if it's Bitcoin, but there are some other coins out there that are essentially a way for people to transact in a faster way. It's cheaper, less volatility and price fluctuations. Famously, there's some engineers at Coinbase who, you know, when they were trying to get their friends to use Bitcoin, would send them, here's your share, here's my share of the pizza from tonight in Bitcoin, and that was like 5 years ago. So they literally ended up paying thousands of dollars in opportunity cost to get that pizza. And just a couple more things. This is just a really quick Coinbase spiel. Basically, our mission is to create an open financial system. So in terms of where we're headed as a company, we're only just getting started. Many of you may be familiar with the app that we have. That's basically our retail brokerage where you can store your crypto or your USD. You can buy a number of crypto assets. And we hold them for you on your behalf. There's also an exchange, which is for our more sophisticated investors and algorithmic or day traders. It's called GDAX. We have a commerce capability, which is essentially for merchants who want to buy and who want to accept Bitcoin from customers or other cryptocurrencies. And then we have Toshi, which I think is the most exciting proposition in terms of us creating an open financial system. And that is actually a decentralized app which sits on top of the Ethereum blockchain. And just one thing, I really love this 4 phases of industry development. This is on our blog. When I was recruiting for Coinbase, I was just like, oh my God, this is so my jam. So basically what Brian Armstrong has laid out, which is our CEO, is that we're still in the very early stages of where the industry is at. And basically what we saw in the really early stages was with Bitcoin and Ethereum, that was like the protocol development stage. So how does a blockchain work? How are we going to incentivize people to take part? And how are we going to get them to use it in a real way, not just be lines of code that people might touch? I would say we're about here in the infrastructure phase now. So as I said, we have a number of our products, including our custody product just coming out. This is where we're starting to see this mainstreaming mass adoption of cryptocurrencies. People want to buy it. Sometimes they want to use it. They want to send it to their friends. They want to get involved. So that's where we're seeing people understand, like even that show of hands earlier, like 60% of the room owns some crypto. So we're really starting to see a lot of interest and people actually buying in. And what we see next is this consumer interface. So what I'm really excited about is that we're able to build apps on top of the Ethereum blockchain, and Toshi is one example of that. Where basically it's a user-controlled wallet, so I can send Ethereum to my Toshi app on my phone, and then I can use that, for example, to buy Kitties or to pay fees for other things. I use Toshi at the moment to get my week in Ethereum news. It's just a push notification that comes through to me, and it's a great way to stay up to date. But there's a lot of stuff being built on there, and it's literally just go in, download it, and see what you like and have a play around. That's when we really start to see this coverage reaching more like 100 million people. And then applications. So we're in the really early days of applications at the moment. I can talk about that in a bit more detail if people want, but I'll leave it open to the FAQ section. Really early days, but that's the really exciting promise of blockchain in terms of bringing some of those more interesting money use cases to life. Cool. All right. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I've talked way more than I was expecting to. Feel free to raise your hand and we can go from there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jean Lombard, and I just have a question. I'm a little bit, even though I'm very well versed in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and I've done 11 ICOs. Could you tell us a little bit, or just the basics of?
Hi. Could you maybe give us the basics about what is GDEX?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So GDEX stands for Global Digital Asset Exchange. It's essentially an institutional exchange where customers can set up an account, it has additional levels of verification, and then you're able to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrency. We have a number of different pairs that we offer. You can do USD to BTC, there's no limits, there's much lower fees. Essentially, we use that as a way for people who, arguably, institutional investors are our target market, and that's a way for them to get involved in trading crypto. We do have market makers on there to provide liquidity for the market to be open. And if you look at it online, it's literally just like a traditional equities exchange would look like. It's got the candlesticks, it's got the charts. There's a lot of different functionality on there.
So going on your institutional investors kind of segment, do you think public pension funds will begin investing in cryptocurrencies once they develop, a proper custodian? Is that what Coinbase is seeing?
It's a good question. I think pension funds probably a little bit more on the conservative side in terms of how they want to direct their asset holdings. So I think there's definitely interest, but they want to make sure that from a custody perspective, they don't need to look after their keys, their private keys or public keys. They don't want that. They just want to be able to hold some of the assets and give their customers exposure. So custody is a key way that Coinbase is hoping to do that. We're not the only custody product in the market. So hopefully, I think what we'll see first is players like crypto hedge funds and some smaller hedge funds starting, then going on to some of the bigger Wall Street players. I would expect a lot of the pension funds would follow suit.
What process do you guys use internally to determine what cryptos to kind of enable people to trade it?
As in to what assets we support?
Yep.
Yeah, so I highly recommend checking out our GDAX blog. We actually shared our guidelines for how we support digital assets. We go through a pretty extensive vetting process, and there's an internal committee that basically determines how we're going to support those. So we do share as much information as we can in that guide. There are some really smart people out there who have published blogs about what they think. By all means, check it out. But I'm obviously can't comment on what those might be.
For Bitcoin, for example, once all the coins have been mined, what incentive is there to the miners to verify these transactions?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so what we're seeing, and which is part of the whole concept of Bitcoin in particular, is that as they become more scarce, the reward obviously goes down. And what we're seeing at the moment is because of the underlying logic to solve those algorithms, it's called proof of work. It takes a lot of computing time and energy to verify that transactions take place. So aside from, aside from those coins becoming more scarce, there's still a little bit of ambiguity as far as I'm aware about, how do you incentivize people once they're all minted, essentially. That's where Ethereum is trying to build on top of on top of their blockchain, a new logic that doesn't require that type of solving, if that makes sense. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure what they're going to do, because the transaction fees get very high and it results in a lot of clogging of the network. So happy to cover that one offline.
Hi, you mentioned the underbanked population around the world, which is something I'm personally very interested in. I'm curious what Coinbase is doing in particular with that particular market, because where I think Coinbase is winning is that you have a very simplistic, very easy platform to use, but it's still just a trading platform. Are you guys looking at maybe being more for transactions in those kinds of markets?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the end game. Toshi is meant to. It's a platform where we want to get as many people on as possible, and the sooner we can do that, the more likely we are to see merchants in developing countries actually using it as a way to accept payments. I guess in that sense, you could almost think of us as trying to disrupt, say, the WeChat application, but have it on a blockchain. So the sooner we can get people onto that platform, obviously the lower cost it is and the more likely merchants are to accept it. That's literally just something that we're playing around with at the moment.
Awesome.
All right, I'm going to go over here. Do we have anyone on this side? No? Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I just want to go back to the previous question he asked. My understanding is at the end of all the mining is done, right? When we do transaction, we do need to pay the transaction and the network fees.
Yeah.
And portion of the network fees actually go to the miner.
Yeah.
So keeping the miner around actually will be rewarded, right? So
yes.
that's why the miner should still be around, even though they didn't create they couldn't get any more new Bitcoin, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I did some research on that.
Thank you. Yeah, admittedly, I was pulling a mental blank on that one because it's been a longish day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So why the big run up in price? For a lot of people, that's where they get scared. It's like one day something's worth $700, next day it's $1,300, and so it feels like a pyramid scheme because it's so volatile. Can you explain why the big changes so quickly?
Yeah, my theory, and other people will have this, have their own perspective. I think a lot of the price run-up is really driven by hype and speculation at the moment. It's people just it's literally people just rushing in, and that's pushing up demand and pushing up the price. I think that's a key driver, and obviously, while ever that's happening, especially with Bitcoin, it's not something that people are going to be wanting to buy and sell and use on a day-to-day basis. The volatility of Bitcoin over time has been going down, trending downward, believe it or not. So, it might not be Bitcoin necessarily that becomes the more stable coin, but there will be other coins out there or tokens that will be able to provide a bit more stability and could be used, for me to pay my movie ticket in and not kick myself later that's now $100 that I lost. Okay, thanks.
I have a question regarding the Coinbase custody. So are you seeing a lot of demand for hedge funds or just normal funds that want to have Bitcoin or one of the cryptocurrency as underlying assets?
I think generally, yes. I mean, with the mainstreaming of crypto, sorry, I'm just going to keep running back so people don't have to turn around. With the mainstreaming of crypto, we're seeing a lot more institutions wanting to hold some level of exposure. Obviously, the percentage exposure really varies depending on their risk appetite. So it's more likely that the smaller crypto hedge funds and other smaller funds are likely to hold a bigger proportion because they have a little bit more discretion in where they put their investors' funds. What we've also seen in 2017 is we went from, a handful of crypto hedge funds to almost hundreds in the space of a year. And I think that shows that, there's going to be a lot of competition. It's going to be very heated. Whether they're all going to go for the custody product, it's a bit early to say, but that is our aim, to be able to accommodate institutional investors.
I also had a question about the custody. Could you kind of just explain what that is and how you guys are solving it, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah, so custody is a little bit more of a traditional finance role or function, I guess I would say. You could almost say, for example, with even Coinbase brokerage, so the app that you may use, that's essentially a type of custody solution where Coinbase holds your private keys and you don't need to worry about them. This is just almost on an institutional scale, so it removes the risk from an institutional investor side of things to have to scale up their own cryptocurrency capabilities, and they can essentially make use of ours and our security network and have assurance that they're not going to lose their funds. That's especially important with some of those bigger institutional players where there are big balances that we're talking about, and that's why we also offer what we call cold storage, which is basically all the private keys are kept on a piece of paper or a computer that's never been connected to the internet, and so it can't be accessed. Obviously, that begs some questions in terms of liquidity and how quickly you can sell it, which is definitely something that we're still working towards. But at the moment, about 2% of our books are in hot storage and available for trading and selling. In the custody product, what you would typically see is there might be a delayed access to funds.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful presentation. In fact, I have a couple of questions. My first question is, and coming from the traditional finance scheme of things, the one question that comes up is that what is the underlying? When you talk of any traditional asset, we are sort of used to looking at things in the past with something that is an underlying. So what is it here that kind of keeps it going? That is one. And two, there are two schools of thought. One that says that the Bitcoin and the Ethereum are going to dominate no matter what. And the other school of thought is that it's going to die. So which school of thought you kind of attest to and why?
Thank you. So there's a school of thought that Ethereum and Bitcoin will always be the dominant players, and there's another one where they might fade away. Can you just remind me of question one?
Yeah, in terms of the underlying.
Oh yeah, so underlying value. Yeah, I mean, in terms of what you might have learned in your finance courses, cryptocurrency kind of doesn't adhere to traditional valuation models. It's a question that I often ask myself as well, because sometimes even, when China banned all crypto exchanges, there was a fluctuation in price. And, the announcement of futures, arguably there was a fluctuation in price. I think some of those things I mentioned before about like security, scarcity, and the potential upside of what could be done with blockchain technology are really key. But I think if you ask anyone, they might give you different answers because it's still something that people are working on. Obviously, traditional finance still adheres to the supply and demand. So if there's less supply, the price does tend to go up. In terms of Bitcoin versus Ethereum, are they always going to be the new players? Dominant players? I would say it's too early to say. They've showed a lot of promise. Bitcoin has been around since 2009, so anyone who's saying that it's a fraud or not a real thing, it's a little bit long to be saying that. I think Ethereum shows a lot of promise in terms of the fact that you can build decentralized apps on top of it. Whether that's the one that stays around, who knows? I think Naval Ravikant has some. I'm such a fangirl, by the way. He has some really great perspectives on that. And it's a podcast called Unchained, which is run by Laura Shin. I would largely agree with his perspective, which is some of the things I've just rattled off there.
So, would you have a simple example of the advantages of building an application on a blockchain versus not on the blockchain?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things being built on the blockchain at the moment, but are they necessarily the right things? I think time will tell as they get tested out. A really interesting example would be something like, I think I'm personally interested in things like if I could hold my identity on the blockchain and choose to reveal certain aspects of my identity to certain institutions or individuals to vet myself that I am who I say I am. So say I had a private key that was associated with my identity and I went into the DMV and they only needed 4 out of 10 things that I had on that private key, I'd be able to reveal certain aspects of that. I'm also really interested in it from a supply chain perspective. So something really simple as ensuring that, things like beef come from where they say they are, or dealing with things like counterfeit art, like how do you actually, make sure that you can verify that it did come from a legitimate source. There are a couple of examples. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything is worthy of being on a blockchain, so I would definitely encourage a lot of research and a bit of skepticism if you're looking into that kind of stuff.
In line with the Coinbase mission of, I'm not going to phrase it articulately, but basically being an open currency around the planet, right? In emerging markets and elsewhere. How do you hedge against the political risk of for example, being shut down in China, the Bitcoin exchange being shut down in China, or how do you make that? How do you realize such a goal? Is there, and maybe one of the lawyers needs to respond on this, is Coinbase part of a consortium? God knows that the financial services organization has a considerable lobbying arm to perpetuate what they do. So where is, and in some ways, good thing, bad thing, because if you're trying to enter a corrupt emerging market and you're about transparency, then how do you penetrate that market to serve the citizens of that country?
Yeah, great question. Definitely something that I know a lot of people who are working on Toshi are thinking about, because the Toshi app is actually available anywhere there's an app store, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy for someone to put some Ethereum in there. Coinbase's objective is always to be the most trusted and the most secure, and that means that we always comply with regulations in those local countries. So if they ban crypto exchanges, we'll pretty much respect that, because we want to be on the right side of helping regulators shape, how this industry should evolve over time. It's really a working thing. I've seen many discussions about how would we make this work in a way that is reasonable for people. We still need to kind of get some payment rails in there in some way, or have a way for there to be for people to be able to load a card or something like that to get Ethereum on there in the first place. I don't have the answer at the moment, but yeah, watch this space. Coinbase is definitely part of our goal, but we're not the only people working on it as well. There's also the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, which is a number of key players. Ethereum is showing the most promise at the moment in terms of how that might work. But yeah, hopefully they're around later, we'll see.
Could you comment on maybe one or two of your favorite or most promising of those decentralized apps that are out there right now that you think are great or potentially have some good potential? And if you want to, one or two of your favorite pre-ICO projects.
Coinbase is one, right?
Pre-ICO.
Coinbase is one app. One of the decentralized app is Coinbase, right?
We are not a decentralized app, but Toshi is. Yeah. I'm excited about Toshi because I can kind of have a direct influence, hopefully, in that. Yeah, so ICOs I'm probably going to stay away from because it's the Wild West, and I don't want anything I say to be an endorsement because I haven't done any kind of risk analysis and all that kind of wonderful waiver stuff. Yeah, there's some really exciting stuff out there. I really like the concept of Augur. It's basically a decentralized oracle, which means that people can kind of make predictions, but it's all based on the Ethereum blockchain, which is pretty cool. While people joke about Kitties, it's really exciting as well in that it uses a new token, which basically it's called the ERC721 token or protocol or whatever. I'm probably not using the right words there, my apologies, but you can look it up, ERC721. It's really interesting because it actually allows you to track unique value attributes associated with underlying assets. So while the Kitties are, the first use case, it's kind of gamifying, a use case that could be expanded to a lot of our traditional assets, both from a financial services perspective and beyond. So, yeah, hope that answers your question.
Sure, thanks.
My question's back to government regulation. In the long run, do you see it hindering, how much, or perhaps even helping the industry? And more specifically with the recent IRS ruling requiring more personal information, have you guys seen an impact on your business from that?
Thank you. On the IRS stuff, I don't think so. Yeah, I think the thing that I would say, and this is definitely a concern amongst many in the crypto community, is that if the regulations come in really hard and fast, it could arguably stifle innovation. And so there are some groups out there who are actually trying to distinguish and help regulators distinguish between what would be arguably a security asset or a store of value versus a usage asset. So a usage example would be that I need to own some Ethereum to be able to contribute to and work on, any kind of ETH projects and to make it run, or to be able to influence what features they might support in the future.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember coursework from a decade ago, but so if the U.S. dollar used to be on the gold standard, and prior to that there was the debate as to whether silver for the once large farming population in the United States, argued for the use of a bimetallic system. Then we went off the gold standard, et cetera. So one of the things that came out of there was, well, velocity of money. So this, I don't know what it was called, like stamping the money or whatever, but so long as you didn't use it, it would naturally depreciate in value. Is there any cryptocurrencies you're aware of that are contemplating such a thing, so as to promote use cases like velocity of money as opposed to a sort of value?
Yeah, it's an interesting point you raise. I mean, I don't know everything that's going on in the crypto space at the moment. I'm not aware of anything. But actually, one of our co-founders, Fred Urson, does write about the velocity of money.
Okay.
He's a bit of a crypto philosopher, so he has some pretty good blog posts about that. I think velocity is really important because the more people using it, obviously the higher the velocity and arguably the more valuable it is. And I think at the moment there's still waiting for that like killer app or that killer crypto that's really going to be that strong money use case. So
So I should start something.
Yeah. Cool. Who else do you have? I'm going to go out the back. Sorry,
I have two questions basically. One, they're both related to the presentation you gave, but you mentioned Trustless Trust, and I kind of want to understand that a little bit better. In terms of like, if you still have to exchange a physical good, it's like how do you ensure that Trustless Trust still? And then the second one is you mentioned that one of the benefits of the blockchain is, or blockchain in the financial space, is no middleman, but Coinbase is obviously like a middleman in this game and profiting a lot of it in terms of like transaction costs. How are you guys contemplating when people are actually starting to adapt these like open source wallets and starting to transact through that? How as a business are you guys going to position yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to run back to the front again. So, Trustless Trust. It's more that I can be a participant in the blockchain or the say Bitcoin network, and you don't need to know who I am. That's what makes it trustless. You don't need to know whether I have like criminal record or whatever. You just need to know that I'm good for the cash. There was something I was going to make a point on, which has just escaped my mind. I'll come back to that. Coinbase is a centralized exchange. Some crypto hardcore enthusiasts would say that's an antithesis of the underlying philosophy of cryptocurrencies. I agree with that for sure. I think it was something I was also like grappling with. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to go and access the blockchain myself and work out how to create a wallet and actually work out how I get my fiat money into the blockchain. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. And that's why we're around to actually help mainstream crypto in a way that you haven't before. You can set up an account and buy crypto with your credit card. It's easy. So that's really what got me on board, and I would say that's the same for a lot of people. There are some decentralized exchanges starting to come out. I think they're very interesting. I think the key challenge is going to be how do you become a decentralized exchange but still serve customers with the speed they expect of a centralized exchange. So I think that will evolve a lot more in 2018.
I have one plug and then one question. The plug is I'm throwing Cryptopalooza with Naval Ravikant, who's keynoting on April 12th, so you should come.
Cool.
And the question I have for you is, what's one thing that you believe about the blockchain that very few people do?
That people do with the blockchain, or just?
What's one thing that you believe about the blockchain that very few people agree with?
Yeah. Let me have a quick think. Sorry that you're one of the later questions because my brain is getting pretty fried. It's probably similar to what I've been saying, that I believe in the upside potential of what's going to happen with us being able to transfer money cheaply and seeing the success of things like an Airbnb on the blockchain and other big companies as we know it today. But I think it's still so early that we might see a lot of the people who are attracting a lot of hype today not be around in a few years' time, because it's just such a complex thing to try and address. I think another key challenge is kind of what we touched on, which I'm really hoping we can find a way to solve, is if we do want to actually access these underbanked markets, how do we tap into them in a way that is attractive, low fees, and meaningful? Because I think at the moment crypto is so volatile that no one in those unbanked markets would use it really, unless they just wanted to store a load of cash. But then what are they going to do? They can't eat it. They can't provide housing. So I think that's a big challenge that I'm not 100% convinced just yet we've got the answer to. Yeah.
First, I want to say thanks for putting this together.
Yeah,
Really
sure.
excellent presentation and Q&A session. So you said you had a background in the finance industry.
Mhm.
So I'd like to kind of get an understanding. I have a lead technology role. I go out and speak with Fortune 500 global 2,000 companies. And typically, when they see a new technology, they almost default to this is a threat. Let's stay away from it. Let's avoid it. How is the financial sector taking a look at this? I've seen POCs where people have kind of kicked the tires with it, but are they looking at this as a transformative technology or something they want to adopt or stay away from?
Great question. I think what you'll, sorry, I'm going to stay at the back now because I want to make sure I get some people up here as well. I think what you'll see from a lot of traditional financial players is we believe in blockchain technology, but we don't believe in cryptocurrency, and we don't see a place for it in the future. I would say that's like a very convenient answer. Cryptocurrencies provide that incentive for A, people to get on the network, and B, for people to create the network and provide mining infrastructure and so on. It's just like if a company goes and implements some kind of sales system that you hate, like you're just never going to use it. So I think cryptocurrency solves that issue in a way that the banks haven't quite grappled with yet. I think you'll find that most big banks have some kind of blockchain working group. Some of those have even been going for several years. Even with the case of Ripple, which is arguably for banks and bigger companies, I think there's still a lot of work to be done on whether they can actually make it work in a private blockchain environment, whether that makes sense. That's generally what I'm seeing, or just outright resistance, which makes sense because it's a huge disruptive change. I'm just going to, all right, we've got 5 minutes. Is there someone up here? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just curious your thoughts on a lot of the scalability challenges that Ethereum and Bitcoin have been having, cost increases and not being able to process all of it.
Yeah, huge problem. I think I saw some stats like at one point someone was claiming that Kitties was clogging up 30 to 70% of the Ethereum blockchain with people just buying collectible cats. Vitalik, who's one of the key founders behind Ethereum, boy genius, said that Ethereum scalability issues is going to be addressed through their Ethereum 2.0 roadmap, and a lot of that is being worked on as side projects as part of Ethereum.org. Some of those have been worked on for a couple of years, and we're yet to see when they might get launched. Yeah, it's a big problem, and I think if cryptocurrencies aren't able to address the scalability challenge, I had that like roadmap up before, like we won't get past like phase 2 to 3. So it's a huge thing that we need to look at. I just can't see it being reasonably adopted in any real money use cases if it stays as slow as it is. Cool. Probably got like maybe time for one more question. Yeah.
I'm kind of concerned about the possibility of cryptocurrencies being used for illegal activities or for money laundering. Is that a real issue, and if so, what can be done to prevent this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people especially, and you might hear this from traditional financial institutions as well, is we don't want to go near it, it's dirty. It helps drug trafficking and all these kind of illegal activities. I think, that was definitely true, especially when it first started as a way to clean dirty money. As we see, say, for example, Coinbase and GDAX are both regulated, so we do full KYC and AML on a lot of our customers. But arguably, there are some providers out there where they don't do any kind of AML and KYC, and you can push dirty money around. But I think that is becoming much more on the fringe of crypto activities, which is why we're seeing, so much more of a price rise and a lot of people coming into the space, both from like serving a purpose in the market as well as number of customers and the amount of hype around crypto generally. As a company, it's something that we take really seriously, but ultimately, with the circulation of cash, you've just got to be really careful, who you decide to partner with, do they have the right controls in place, and trying to address it that way. Should we wrap it up there? Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. I hope that was useful. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'd just like to give a plug for, we've actually got a theme on the crypto blockchain theme for the next couple of months. And I wanted to introduce you to Jay Yang. He's actually doing some Ask Me Anything on the blockchain. 3 sessions, 2 here in San Francisco and 1 in Palo Alto over the next few weeks. And I thoroughly recommend this to anyone that wants to know a little bit about the technical side of the blockchain.
Right. So there are a lot of questions that are fundamental. Like basically, what is cryptocurrency for? What problem is it solving? How does it work underneath? Like if you look at the hood of your car, like what's there? Like there's an engine, there's a bunch of stuff, right? So I'll cover some of those and try to be as descriptive as possible so that you can follow through what happens when you send the money to someone else, like say send Bitcoin or Ethereum. What happens under the hood? How does the transaction get validated? How does someone know that you received it? What happens when, say, there's a dispute between the record that's sent? And I'll cover those things, as well as some of the more like foundational level knowledge about like why are these even a problem to begin with? Because money is a very old technology, and so the cryptocurrency is just the latest iteration of technology that sits on money. So hopefully you'll join me for one of these 3 sessions, and I'll cover things like give you enough information so you can look it up, as well as move on to more detailed information like mining rewards, 51% attack, all the things that was somewhat touched here. I'll go more in depth.
Thanks, Jay. Really, crypto and blockchain have jumped the chasm in the last few months, as we probably all realise. And I think the more technical information and information full stop that we have, the less risk we have. But it also means that we can get on board with this incredible opportunity. I am so excited about what's happening in that area. I also wanted to give a plug for a panel that we've got coming up on February the 6th here in San Francisco. It's a cryptocurrency law panel. We expect this panel to be totally sold out, so I would suggest booking ahead. I have an SEC person, Scott Walker, who's actually going to contribute to this panel. Unbelievable, and such hard work to get him. I also have a former senior counsel from the SEC who's also going to contribute, a female, which is fabulous. I've also reached out this morning to an FTC person from DC, and we're hoping he will also come. We've got 2 amazing legal people who will be here, one from DC and one from LA. I can't stress enough how profound this panel will be. I want to thank Sam Su for suggesting it, and obviously I did the hard work of getting the people, but this panel will be one of those ones that you want to be at. We will have a live stream, but as I said, I think the actual physical seats will actually sell out soon. So I suggest if you're interested in what the SEC, what the legal implications of the crypto blockchain world are, to actually book for this panel. Also, I totally encourage you to come to Jay's presentations, and I think that, as I said, the more information we have, the less risk we're going to face. But it also means we can be empowered in this new world. Thank you so much for coming tonight.